The Chronicle started in a G-city that had become a shadow of its former self. Once full of life, it now lay in ruins with broken buildings and empty streets. Once a boy, Ye Qing, who was a level 0 abyssal scavenger, came out running from a rank C abyssal gate. It had shiny blue rays coming out of it. There was a one-eyed monster trying to catch him from the gate. A man was standing outside with a sword in his hand, fighting with the monster. He scolded the boy while saving him, saying that he was too slow. The boy elaborated that his job every day was to recycle and sort the trash left over by the job changers. After fighting with monsters, and the supervisors of the abyss do not allow those resources to leak into the society of ordinary people. He was looking at the crystals that he had bought in a wooden box and was cleaning them with a piece of cloth. He said that those were C-rank crystals, and just one crystal was worth over 50,000 yuan. The guy with the sword told him that they would count the rewards for those dungeons one by one. If he had secretly hidden any crystal, not only he would be fined a lot of money, but he would also be locked in jail. The boy replied by saying not to worry. He had done that job for many years and he knew all the rules. The job of abyssal scavenger was usually done by those who had a level O. If the front combat team had not cleaned up the monsters thoroughly, the lives of the level 0 player in the rear had been in danger at any time. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the job was worth one's life. Ye Qing thought that while looking at the scavengers rushing out of the gate, the basic salary for returning from a dungeon was 300 yuan. Each scavenger was to get 1,000th of the value of the trash picked up, which was about 600 yuan. After deducting the agency fee of 30%, the net earning was 540 yuan. He was 670,000 yuan away from paying off his debt, and he needed to work harder. There was a construction worker standing beside Ye Qing. He told him that he had a big job and the commission was worth 3,000th. He asked Ye Qing if he was in. Ye Qing exclaimed in surprise if it was really 3,000. The worker questioned, wasn't he always in need of money? If he really wanted to go, then he had to catch up with the group immediately. He replied, saying that he would catch the group right away. Ye Qing was in the bus with other workers along with him. One of the workers asked the others if they were going to Shefeng City's public shopping mall. He asked if that wasn't the abyssal replica mentioned in the news just then. He said that it was said to be an A rank. He further said that no wonder the reward was so high. He had heard that many groups were wiped out and not even one person had made it out. The other worker asked if it was another subcontract. The worker sitting in front replied by saying most likely. He also said that in addition to cleaning up, there was another important mission. It was bringing back the equipment of the teams that were wiped out. The previous worker exclaimed in anger and said that those old capitalists were really ruthless and vile, and asked who allowed the abyss to be supervised commercially by the capitalists. Ye Qing was looking out the window the whole time. He was thinking about business development. 10 years ago, the abyssal gate was descended from the void and creatures of the abyss appeared in front of humans. Only those job changers had the special abilities to deal damage to the abyssal creatures. As the demon beast died, people discovered that there were not only energy products such as magic crystals in the abyss, but also various mysterious weapons and props. Therefore, just like discovering a new continent for the second time, mankind had set off an uproar of the development of the abyss. A large number of traditional enterprises had collapsed, and the social funds were used to support the new market, that were the abyssal industries. Ye Qing remembered that he was rejected by a hospital when his sister was admitted. The doctor said that they do not take level 0 members, and the hospital was not a welfare association.
Do you want to know the name of this manga, along with all the manga names of the recaps we did in our channel? How about also the chapter numbers our recaps end? You can simply ask the names in our Discord community for free, or become a donor to get them all in one place. You can either be a donor in Patreon, or be a member in our YouTube channel. Just scan this QR code, or go to the link in the description to become a donor. Moreover, becoming a donor automatically makes you a VIP member of our Discord server, with over tens of thousands of members.
If he had not paid sooner, he would have had to take his little sister and leave. He had to apologize and asked to give him a few more days. He also remembered that he was kicked out of his house because he had not paid 2 months of rent and was called trash. The employment situation was unprecedentedly bleak for level 0 players who had not successfully changed jobs. They had basically already become useless in society. He then got a ticket from a stranger that offered him a small loan and could be received in 1 second. The stranger asked him if he was in need of money. He further said that the collateral would be the most valuable thing he had, which was his organs. Ye Qing was remembering that all while sitting in the bus. Suddenly, the worker sitting in front started talking to him and said that he heard someone borrowed 1 million from a loan shark and lost everything while trading in the stock market. He further said that if the person could not pay back the money, he had to sell a kidney. And it seemed like he had a little sister who relied on him to support her. The medical bills alone cost so much. That type of person might as well have died. He was burdened a lot at that time that he could only live like trash for the rest of his life. When the bus arrived at its destination, everyone got out of it. There were a few people standing on the top of the rocks. One of them said that the scavenger guys were too slow. Another person said to keep up with them, and they wouldn't take responsibility if they died. Ye Qing told himself that he needed to work hard that time to earn money and come back alive. It was an underground city that had a Shenfeng City public market with B-rank abyss. That was the first time he had come to a B-rank abyss. As they entered, wolves started approaching towards them. A guy with a sword and shield in his hand, tall, had a good build with spiky blonde hair, called Lao Chen. Lao Chen was the one with special abilities. He said he knew, and that was just a pack of first-class spirit wolves. As soon as the wolves were about to attack them, Lao Chen moved both of his hands in front of the wolves, and the flames of fire started coming out of his hands that scared the wolves, and they ran away. The guy with the shield and sword warned everyone and ordered not to let their guards down. He also said that the demonic beasts could ambush them from any dark corners. The other person standing next to him had glasses on his eyes with orange hair, asked about their destination. The blonde hair guy replied that it's the 5th floor. A girl standing along them with a hood on her head said that she doesn't know if that was just her illusion, but the size of the 1st floor of the market seemed to have increased by more than 5 times, and the height had increased more than 3 times. The orange-haired guy replied, saying that it was abyssalization, which was a replica created based on the real world, but its internal structure had completely mutated. Then he asked why the group that was sent there left no traces behind and where were the dead bodies. He pointed towards the scavengers and ordered them to find the dead bodies, not just follow them. While going towards their destination, Lao Chen had stopped to tie his shoelaces. Ye Qing was just behind him, and he heard him saying that no matter where a level 0 would be gone, their only use would be trash. Ye Qing accidentally bumped into him and tripped that scared Lao Chen for a second. He got angry and shouted at him to watch where he was going. Ye Qing immediately apologized. Lao Chen held him from his collar and pushed him upwards on the wall and said that bumping into trash disgusted him, and he thought he was a monster. The blonde hair guy asked Lao Chen not to bother with those scavengers, and they had a mission. Ye Qing wasn't able to breathe. Lao Chen threw him on the floor and said if he knew he was trash, then he better stay away from him. While picking up his cap and himself from the floor, Ye Qing thought that Lao Chen was a prick who looked down on others. Lao Chen then asked if that's what was called a professional team. While walking along, many thoughts were coming in Ye Qing's mind. A burden to society, a useless person, a trash. Those were the collective terms society had for level 0 members. But what they didn't know was their experience value was 99/100ths, and he was about to reach the next level, and that was level 1. Suddenly a wolf came in front of them, and everyone shouted that it was a demon beast and asked to run away. Ye Qing stood in front of the spirit wolf and asked himself if the guy who left behind was in the front lines. Sweat started dripping as he stared into the wolf's eyes. He saw a wooden shield and a wooden staff on the floor. He thought to himself that the demonic beast was exactly the opportunity he had been waiting so long for. He picked up the shield and staff and attacked the wolf. Blue sparkly ashes started to come out of the wolf's eyes. Ye Qing attacked it again and screamed at it to die. He heard everyone saying if he was really that dumb and that he hadn't been in the field even for a day or two. Doesn't he know that only job changers could deal damage to the demonic beasts? He replied by saying that he knew that and attacked the wolf again. With such weak attributes, he couldn't even break through the defense of the weakest monsters. That was something he knew better than anyone else, and because he understood that fact so clearly, that's why he needed to use more strength. He continued attacking the wolf. On the other side, Lao Chen laughed and said that once those level 0 members would see that demon beast in critical health, they would be so scared that their legs would start shaking. The blonde hair guy held a crystal in his hand and said they could earn a fortune just by casually killing a few monsters. But if they would encounter a demon beast, they wouldn't have been able to do anything, and no wonder they were a low-life trash. They would have kept the most expensive items and would give the rest to the scavengers. He mockingly said that they would ask those pieces of trash to clean that up. The girl then called their boss and said that it seemed there was another beast that had slipped away the other way. It was a demon beast. Everyone was asked to run. The blonde hair guy said that it was exactly like what their boss had told them. Lao Chen exclaimed that he had already requested the purple piece of clothing and no one could take that. He further added that no one was allowed to snatch it from him. The wolf was attacked with an arrow on its back. Ye Qing screamed he would not let himself die like trash. As the wolf lunged towards him, he gripped his staff tightly, and with a swift and desperate motion, he swung the staff at the wolf, striking it across the side. And the wolf was dead. It was just 1 point of damage applied. He got so happy and screamed out his victory against the wolf. Suddenly Lao Chen came to him and taunted him that the lone horse had managed to kill one low-level wolf. He also asked if he was acting like a hero. He jeered at him and asked that he really thought he had lived for too long. He again mocked him by calling him a piece of trash and said that they had not spent the money to get their corpse. There was blood coming out of the side of Ye Qing's mouth while Lao Chen held him from his collar, but he was still happy that he had unlocked the first level. A job changer's path was not limited to one path. When their experience accumulates to level 1, even a level 0 member could successfully switch jobs. They could even obtain the hidden job more easily. Just to achieve that goal, they had a need of thinking of ways to gain experience so they could level up. But to a level 0 member who was unable to deal damage to Demon Beast, it was harder for them than ascending to the heavens. He had spent so many years facing the risks and risking his life to search for a guaranteed critical hit to cause at least 1 point of damage. Accumulating that day by day was the only way that he could earn experience points. And at that time, those conditions were met. He had dealt 1 point of damage to a spirit wolf and had earned 1 experience point. The system showed that his experience points were increased from 99 100ths to 100 100ths. The conditions to level up were fulfilled. Lao Chen was in shock and asked how a mere level 0 abyss like him had managed to get a job shifting. The system congratulated him on achieving level 1. Blue color rays were all around him. His maximum level was level 1. Lao Chen started laughing and said what kind of job changer was that? He also added that a trash picker was still a trash picker even after changing jobs. He mocked him and asked that the maximum level was level 1. He added further to it that it was once-in-a-lifetime precious opportunity, and he changed his job to a trashy job that literally meant trashy. He laughed at him again and taunted by saying that it suited him. He then grabbed his collar and warned him by calling him a level 1 scavenger, and said that his buddies were all gone and the mission of cleaning up would be completed by him alone. Lao Chen went to tell everyone that something incredulous had happened. Ye Qing asked himself if being scavenger weak, and if a scavenger's maximum level was 1, he couldn't use his level-up attributes to grow. He also asked himself what would be a scavenger's ability. The system started showing a message that there was recycled trash found that was a corpse of a low-level spirit wolf. His eyes sparkled when he read the message and realized that this was the abyssal scavenger's ability. He saw 2 hands with long, scratchy nails coming out of the system and dragged the body of the wolf inside the purple light. He found it a little scary. There was a recycling sign coming on the system, and it had written that the trash was being disintegrated. Another message was shown with a sign of trash, along with a victory sign of those 2 hands that disintegration had completed. The hand then came out of the system with a mirror on it that showed a picture of a spirit wolf with red eyes, and on top, if it was written, that he had gained a spirit dash and he had 3 attribute points. He asked if he could get cards and personal attribution points from corpses. He requested the system to open the attribute board. The system showed a table that had his name in the list. It had his strength, agility, intelligence, will, constitution, and luck. It was all 1+. The corpse needed 3 agility in order to be used. He thought to himself that it was only 3 agility points. He decided to put all his 3 attribute points into agility. The system then gave a message that he had satisfied the conditions to use Spirit Wolf, N. He currently had 4 points and required over 3 agility points. It asked him if he would like to use that. He replied in order to use it. Green ashes started to come out of the system and entered into his body. When it stopped, he asked if that was it, and were there no results. He was then being called out to clean up. As he stepped forward, he started running so fast and tripped over a root of a tree and fell down. He wondered if that was a skill. The system showed that the spirit dash had cooled down. When he got up and saw there were many corpses of wolves on the wolves, and on each wolf it was written that recyclable trash had been found. He muttered to himself that not only he could get attributes, he could also recycle the beast's powers. That was the sole ability of an abyssal scavenger with a maximum level of level 1. Abyssal scavengers were clearly outrageously strong. The system started showing that he had gained 4 attribute points to allocate, he had gained 3 points to allocate, and there were few more of the same messages on the system. He thought to himself that ever since he had touched a corpse of a ghost wolf, he gained the ability of Soul Dash. After that, devouring the same type of corpse no longer granted new ability, and the rewards for salvaging a large number of corpses of the same type would gradually be decreased. He then asked the hands of the system if the skills that required salvaging new types of creatures were to gain a one-time reward, as there was more trash on the other side. The system then showed him another message that he had gained 1 attribute point to allocate. The list appeared again in which it was written that he had 111 allocable points. He started thinking about where he should add his attributes. It seemed like he won't be lacking in attribute points in the future. He reflected that he should distribute them evenly. His strength, agility, willpower, constitution, his luck, all were increased to 20. In the next scene, the blonde hair guy asked Lao Chen if Ye Qing had really become a scavenger. He further said that it was a hidden class that was not even in the big career table. The orange-haired guy replied and said that there were hidden classes written into the big career change table every year, but the rankings for the most valuable careers had hardly changed. He also said that most of those so-called classes were just for laughs. Lao Chen in response said that considering his maximum value, which was only 1, at most he was an F rank that was slightly stronger than a level 0 person, or maybe not different at all. The blonde hair guy told both of them to just ignore him and move forward and ordered them to stay vigilant. As they walked along, they stood up in front of a weird-looking creature with a skeleton face and finger-like projections coming out of its mouth. Everyone was shook by looking at it. After looking at it, Lao Chen said that the mission target had been found and that it was the leader of the Falcon Eye hunting group known as the Eagle Eye. The girl in their group surprisingly asked how come there was a mound in that shopping mall, and after all, it was the 5th floor. The orange-haired guy exclaimed while touching those finger-like projections and said that the time for abyssification there had not exceeded 48 hours in total, yet the bodies had been dried up to that extent. The girl said that they had only encountered low-level ghost wolves along the way, but those were the B+ rank Falcon Eye hunting group. She asked if it was strange that they all had died there. Suddenly, a dead creature on the floor held the blonde-haired guy's leg. He shook and screamed that there was more than just them there. An urgent message started to come up on the system that there was an abyssification in the Shengfeng City People's Mall, and preliminary inference was a B-grade mutation. At that time, there were 217 missing people. The blonde guy ordered everyone to retreat. He also said that it was an ambush and they had been tricked. While attacking the creatures from the fire ashes, Lao Chen said that he knew something was wrong when he couldn't find their bodies. He elaborated that they had been concentrated there and had piled up into a mountain of corpses. The blonde guy said that the low-level monsters along the way were just bait to lure them deeper. And there it was, the true master of that abyss. It was a 3-eyed creature with octopus-like hundreds of hands and legs. A message came that it was a high-level hell-devouring flower, almost A-grade. He asked everyone to look up there. He further said that the Falcon Eye hunting group had all come back to life. On the other side, Ye Qing was receiving messages on the system like the salvage, the served ghost world and salvage, the charred ghost wolf. Another message came up that addressed him as a novice scavenger and said that he had salvaged 50 corpses. He joyfully exclaimed that he had unlocked an achievement and there was a reward for it too. The reward was a level 1 plain dagger, which was a sword. Ye Qing got disappointed on the reward and mumbled that his profession had even given junk quality rewards for achievements. He sarcastically said that it was quite interesting. Out of nowhere, a creature from the Falcon Eye hunting group attacked him and he flew far and fell on the ground. The system showed the message the trigger agility check that was a 20 was a perfect dodge. He exhaled and was scared and said to himself that he thought he was about to die. But then he felt more agile. He asked if that was because of the addition of the attribution points. It seemed to him that he had really become stronger. The creature again came in front of him and attacked him, but that time he stood straight and had not fallen on the ground. He mused himself that he had not just added agility, he had also added strength. He stepped hard on the ground that showed a message on the system that the soul dash had been activated, and he attacked the creature and said that it was his turn to attack. He thought to himself that there would be no more damage onwards. He jumped and punched the creature on its face. Another message popped up on the system that his trigger strength check was 20, and he had caused a breakthrough effect on the target that had increased the physical damage by 100%. Ye Qing smirked and said he was different that time. The system again gave a message that his intelligence had 20 points, and his insight was significantly enhanced, allowing him to discover hidden information about the target. A creature with long hair was standing in front of him, and over it the message from the system popped up that it was an infested human elite. Its weakness was flame and neck connection fire spots. Both Ye Qing and the creature came running towards each other to attack. He knew its weak point was its neck. His plain dagger started to come up on the screen, along with a message that his trigger luck check was 20, and if the plain dagger effect would be activated, then the target would have gained the bleeding effect. They got to know that he had killed the infested human. The trigger constitution check was 20, and the poisoning effect was neutral. Ye Qing was very happy on his first successful solo kill. The infested human could have been salvaged, so he ordered the system to salvage, which was successfully done. He then got an option of gaining the passive skill by the toxic transformation. The poisoning effect was reversed and randomly transformed into a beneficial effect for him. That was all written on a card given to him by the system. Ye Qing thought if toxic transformation meant that he could have had toxic waste as a medicine, he commanded us to use the card. By doing that, his passive skill transformation was added, and he had gained 5 attribute points to allocate. Then he got a decomposed and dropped spoiled potion. On the card, it was a purple bottle and it was written not to drink as it was highly poisonous. He took the bottle out of the card and wondered that with toxic transformation, highly poisonous effects could be transformed into beneficial effects. He decided to drink the purple potion to see what would happen to him. The poisoning effect of toxic transformation was reversed into a healing effect, and the damage he received before had been restored. The system informed him that all basic attributes were doubled, and the effect would last for the next 10 minutes. The randomly obtained effect was so powerful, he felt like his strength had surged. He remembered that after adding intelligence to a certain value, he could see more hidden information about the target. So that time, he allocated those 5 points to intelligence. His list appeared again where his strength, agility, willpower, constitution, and luck were increased from 20 to 40, and his intelligence was increased from 25 to 50. Suddenly, he heard the voices of monsters. He wondered if he had missed a monster. A huge group of monsters was approaching him. He was reminded of what he was being called by everyone, the burden to society, garbage, a useless person. But after that, he could tell them loudly that his name was Ye Qing and he was a scavenger. He called the monsters trash and shouted at them to come at him. On the other side, the corpse of monsters had attacked those leaders. The Falcon hunting team had been parasitized. The blonde hair guy sighed and said that even though it was a corpse, its strength was actually stronger than when it was alive, and not to mention there was still the man-eating flower. Everyone was ordered to retreat. The monsters kept coming on them. Lao Chen came into a state of shock and screamed that the monsters were very strong. He then said that he went there for money and equipment, and it would be a waste to die there. He attacked the monsters with slow magic, which also attacked the blonde guy. He asked him what he was doing, and they were on the same team. Lao Chen apologized and told him that he had to slow them down so he could escape easily. He also mentioned that he would burn a few incense sticks for him when he would come back and run away from there. Lao Chen mused silently that he would not lose much if he would run right then. At least he would have still had the equipment he had picked up. He could just make up an excuse for the team being wiped out once he would escape. All of a sudden, he saw a shadow standing in front of him and fell on the ground. Later, he realized it was Ye Qing. He exclaimed to Lao Chen that he had betrayed his teammates to save his own skin. Lao Chen saw a group of dead monsters behind him. He was astonished and asked if Ye Qing had done that all. He speculated that he could not leave Ye Qing there alive. If he told the supervisory committee, it wouldn't have ended well for him. He yelled at him that he doesn't want to become stronger. Doesn't he want to stand out? Now is the time. He said to him to go and become food for the monsters. He kicked Ye Qing on his stomach, he got hurt and fell on the ground. The system told him that his strength check was triggered. It was a critical failure, and his kick had no effect on the target and it was backfired. He called Ye Qing a stinky and asked what was going on. In response, Ye Qing said that he was not even worth being called trash and attacked Lao Chen with his powers and threw him in the purple light. The system started recycling him as garbage, but then mentioned that it was non-recyclable trash. He then realized that not all trash could be recycled. His recycling ability got upgraded, and he could recycle useless abilities, but with the target's consent. He asked if they would faint. Was that considered consent? He murmured to himself that it was convenient. He got to know from the system that he had used the Sorcerer Experience card, and his acquired ability was Flame Field Control. Fireball required 15 intelligence points, and his intelligence was 50 points. It triggered an overcast effect, and the fireball evolved into an Inferno Blast. He saw another group of monsters coming toward him to attack. He asked himself how to cast a fireball. He remembered that the guy did it by moving his hand forward. Orange flames started to come out of his hand, and there was a huge blast that appeared in front of his eyes. All the monsters disappeared from there. He screamed that he hadn't had a chance to recycle, and asked not to obliterate them all. Someone attacked him from the back that instant with 2 swords in his hands. Ye Qing got alert and attacked him back and said that he had not learned any melee combat skills yet. The attacker said that he doesn't want to be resurrected by that thing after he dies, so he asked him to become his help instead. Ye Qing got a golden shield from the system, and he was commanded to use it, and killed the attacker. After that, he apologized and said that he had to recycle his body then. He had obtained the dagger proficiency card. He could then use daggers like a thief, and could launch a storm-like stabbing attack. He used the dagger proficiency card. He said to himself that the ordinary dagger in his hand felt more agile. He was asked if his mission was to find the Falcon group and bring them out of the instant dungeon. He replied with a yes while attacking the group of monsters. He was then told that if their bodies would not be found, his mission would be deemed a failure, and he would not receive any rewards. The system informed him that his recycling was successful, and he had obtained violence. His strength and agility attributes would increase significantly, and he would be immune to control skills. He knew that already. He was then asked if he had found the corpses of the Falcon group in the dungeon. He responded that he had found them, but they had all been recycled already. He was questioned how they were already recycled. They were dragged into the abyss by some person. On the other side, in the interrogation room of the Supervisor Committee of the Abyss, Lao Chen was told that he was the only survivor from the dungeon, and the person he mentioned does not exist. He was also informed that, when he was found, his level was reduced to level 1. That was something they had never witnessed before. Lao Chen replied by saying that his abilities were being recycled by that person. He then told that person was a trash picker. He was talking about Ye Qing. He thought that their pollution level from the abyssal energy was high and was causing them to have hallucinations. That was the suspicion the killer team had established. He tried to convince them that he wasn't lying to them and it was really that trash picker. At the entrance of B-rank Abyss, Ye Qing was standing with other soldiers and told them that after he sold all the magic crystals on the black market, he only received about 30% of the money. As the crystal business had always been a monopoly of large enterprises, private sales were illegal. The black market would charge over 70% as the handling fee. The magic crystals he brought out were barely enough to pay off the debt he owed loan sharks in the past few years, but there was no more surplus. If he kept using his recycling ability in front of other people, he was afraid that he would be reported to the supervisors, not to mention that he was a person who had awakened a strange hidden job. It wouldn't be impossible for them to lock him up and do research on him for more than a year. He had to make more money while he was free. There was a recycling logo tattooed on his right hand. The leader standing among those people said that it was an abyss that had just appeared. Everything was still unknown. He assumed that they all knew the risks of getting involved, and so the rewards would be doubled that time. He further said that people who had qualifications as job changers could come up to him and sign up. He emphasized that only those should go to him who were over B rank qualify. Ye Qing asked the leader if he thought someone like him qualified. The leader asked his rank. He told enthusiastically that he was a level 1 scavenger. As soon as he said that, everyone started laughing at him. The leader held his hand, mocked him, and said that even a piece of trash like him had the guts to call himself a job changer. He ordered him to go stand in line with the rest of the trash pickers. He thought to himself that if he would make them think he was weak, they would lower their guard, and he would probably be thrown to the back of the group and would be taken on a supporting role. He reflected further that in that case, even if he would secretly collect corpses and trash behind everyone's back, no one would notice. That was his lazy but genius plan. A girl with long white hair was standing behind them. She asked the leader to let go of him. Other people started murmuring that she was the daughter of the famous Liu family, the one who had awakened the God-chosen job. She told the leader to take him, and they would have just enough people. She was the rising star of the hunting group, also known as the God-chosen child, Liu Xingran. She continued to talk to the leader and said that Ye Qing was only level 1, and he was still a newbie without any proof of qualification. She also said that it doesn't matter if he was a newbie. It doesn't even matter if they all were level 1. They all were just there to make up the numbers, just like trash. The leader drooled and called her Miss Liu and said that they were only responsible for protecting her. That was her family's property, and she naturally had the final say. Ye Qing sighed and said that was close. He thought he was going to be kicked out again. He added that it was not the first time he had played the role of being trash. He stared at Liu and thought about where he had seen her before. He suddenly remembered that it was 2 years ago, and without warning a monster attacked Liu. As she was just about to attack back with her sword, Ye Qing came forward and stabbed the monster with a staff into its mouth. The monster fell on the ground, leaving Liu in shock. He had gained 1 point of critical hit damage. Liu asked him if he was the trash picker. How come he could kill demon beasts? Ye Qing burst out in joy and said he did that for the first time. He had successfully received 1 point of experience. She asked him if he was okay. She had only heard of that rumor, but she didn't expect anyone to actually try that way of upgrading. She further asked why was really using that way to gain experience. In reply, he said to make money, obviously. She responded by saying she doesn't believe him. That way gaining experience would cost his life. Meanwhile, he was amazed by the number of crystals he was collecting by killing the demon beast. He was so happy that all the crystals were his. He asked Liu what she knew. He taunted her, saying that job changers thought they were so superior, further questioning her how she could understand the bitterness and hardship of the lives of people like him. She was the one that left the group and moved forward alone. He asked if she was throwing away her life. When she faced so many demon beasts, she just single-handedly rushed towards them. He inquired if she was trying to prove something. She yelled at him and said that she did that all to become stronger. She wanted to become the first one to conquer that place. Ye Qing questioned that place? She started cross-questioning him to know his real purpose for wanting to change jobs. He said it was his family. He wanted to become strong and protect his family. She then asked his name. He told her it was Ye Qing. She introduced herself and said that she was Liu Xingran. She further said that she would look forward to seeing his successful job change someday. Once he would change his job, he could join her group. She suggested he conquer that place with her then. They both shook hands. Ye Qing accepted the deal and asked her not to slow him down when that time would come. She told him that they would see after his job changes. She had killed 30 demon beasts by herself just then, and he had just finished one off at most. She counted that as 0.5. Suddenly, people from the supervisor committee rushed towards her and said that they had been looking for her for ages. They asked how she could secretly sneak into the depth of the abyss. They mocked Ye Qing by calling him a trash picker and ordered him not to go near their lady. They took her away and said that the president was very furious and almost broke their legs. She asked them to wait, and then threw a crystal in his direction and asked him to catch, and told him that it was his 0.5 reward. He caught the crystal. He reminded himself of her name and went in the other direction. In the next scene, he was standing with the leader, Liu Xingran, and other Abyss members. They were all standing in front of a gate that had purple lights all over it. The leader slapped him on the back of his head and alarmed him that it was definitely Liu Xingran, and asked him why he was staring at her. He was ordered to move all the crystals. He said to Liu that he would try his best not to drag the others down. She appreciated him and told him to get his gear and get ready to go. Everyone followed the leader and Liu Xingran behind, yet Qing knew that he had to work hard to make money and return back alive. When he fought his way out of the abyss the previous time, he had mastered the Shield Warrior, Assassin, and Berserker abilities. Finally, he had obtained a boss-level ability. Because of his radar chart point-adding method, no matter which career form he would have taken on, there weren't any shortcomings. The attribute points were also divided equally among the 6, so the total could pile up to over 100 points. After all, he was the one who had wiped and cleaned all the recyclable things in the previous abyss. He questioned himself what level would be the equivalent of 100 points. His eyes started observing everyone's attribute perception. There was a giant guy with a devil horn helmet in front of him. He could see his attributes. It came into his knowledge that the guy's strength attribute was only 12, and his weakest point was intelligence with just 1 point. He thought that if a regular mortal's strength attribute was 1 point, then a warrior with 12 points had approximately 12 times the strength of a mortal. Ye Qing's strength attribute value was 100 points, which meant his strength was around 100 times more than that of a mortal. While walking along with everyone, he tripped and banged his head on the wall. Everyone looked back at him and asked what had just happened, and if there was any earthquake. He shakenly laughed and said that the underground structure was a bit unstable. The leader exclaimed in excitement that he had found a chest. He then said that it was troublesome, and it seemed that they didn't have any assassins on their team, and the chest was at least A rank. Ye Qing said that he could try opening it. He went towards the chest and opened it immediately. After that, he commented that picking the lock was as easy as eating. The leader was in shock and asked him that wasn't the ability to pick locks a skill that only an assassin higher than level 5 was able to learn? In response, he told the leader that a level 1 scavenger could learn a lot of convenient abilities because they had to come across unopened chests quite often while picking up the trash. The leader stated that they would distribute the loot after the mission had ended. He ordered everyone to continue moving forward. Ye Qing picked up a pebble in his hand and asked a girl from their team to stand still there. He saw something in front of her. He threw the pebble in her direction and a secret door was opened in front of them. The girl was amused and asked him if he was really just a level 1 scavenger. He responded to her by saying not to overthink that. They had just coincidentally come across something he was good at. He continued by saying that he used to often trigger traps while picking up the trash. He had suffered too much because of them, so he naturally awakened the ability of trap perception. He asked her if there was anything weird about that. Liu was standing behind them and was listening to their conversation. He then got a message from the system that the deception check was a success, and the target had become more persuadable. Everyone was standing in shock and were reading the message. Ye Qing asked if that was the power of 100 points of intelligence. The leader gave him a broken one-handed mace which was of normal grade and could be used at level 1. Ye Qing thought to himself that it seemed like his evaluation in their minds was still not good. Everyone was told to move forward. As they were moving towards the secret door, someone asked what it was, and if it was a secret treasure at the end of the level. They sighed and said getting there was really too simple. That abyss would be an award room without any monsters. There was a glass filled up with a red liquid, probably with blood, and it was boiling. The system told them that a reward room was a room with no monsters and only treasures. It was a unique abyss type. Liu told them not to celebrate too early and to pay attention to where the monsters might have spawned. The guy with the horn helmet held a stone tablet in his hand and asked that it could not be that the stone tablet was all there to that abyss. He then told everyone that they had obtained the final treasure and they could leave from there. The blood in the glass started to boil more. The system warned them that the blood trial was starting. It busted and the blood started to come out like a huge volcano. Everyone stood in shock. The leader called them idiots and said that it was not a reward room at all, it was a trap. It was a blood nightmare. Thousands of monsters came out of that blood. Liu shouted to prepare for the battle. Everyone took out their swords and started to attack. Ye Qing thought that in order to prevent his attributes from being exposed, he should fight with about 25% of his strength that time. He wore the Ring of Weakness, which was also known as trash. Its effect was it would reduce all the attributes of the wearer to the percentage of their choice. He wondered what would be the use of a ring that could only reduce attributes. He then thought no matter how useless something would seem, it would come handy one day. He activated his spirit dash mode and attacked the monsters with one strike. Liu curiously asked, just one strike? She found that very interesting. Then she also attacked the monsters with just one stroke and killed many. The horn helmet guy asked what that was. With just one cut, it was bursting into pieces. He also said that it was condensing. That thing had taken on the form of humans. The Blood Nightmare's original state was very fragile. When attacking humans, it would strengthen itself according to its opponent and imitate their form. The other girl appreciated that he was doing a great job. He got happy after listening to that compliment. Out of nowhere, a Blood Nightmare came and attacked him with a sword on his stomach and knocked him out on the ground. The girl said that beheading it was no use. She then asked if that thing was unable to be killed. The Blood Nightmare attacked him again on the ground. Liu told him to get up and it was just a Blood Nightmare, and they were just embarrassing themselves. When he didn't get up, she said that as expected, a piece of trash was just trash after all. Another Blood Nightmare was stepping towards the girl and the guy with horn helmet on. The girl had a stick with fire at its end. She exclaimed and said that it was too fast and there wasn't enough time to cast magic spells. Ye Qing came in front of them and attacked it with the fire flames and said that since a sword was ineffective against it, it would be better to make that evaporate on the spot. There was a great flame explosion on the Blood Nightmares. The girl shakenly said that it was an S-grade evocation spell. How could a level 1 player do that? From the other side, 2 other Blood Nightmares came to attack him. He screamed out so loud and that gave the Nightmares a shock. His Berserk mode was activated. It had some exclusive abilities that included his speed and strength to increase to 100%, and the damage received to the Nightmares was also increased to 100%. He kept attacking the Nightmares until their flesh was all over the place. He then saw all the flesh was condensing back and formed a giant Blood Nightmare. He was confused about what was up with that monster, realizing it was being replicated. It was a king-level Blood Nightmare. He asked himself with a puzzle expression how a king-level nightmare appeared in a B-rank abyss, trying to identify what was wrong. It was able to imitate the target's form, and it grew stronger when it encountered a strong enemy. That Blood Nightmare absorbed his attributes and immediately evolved into a king-level monster. The minister attacked him, but he succeeded in surviving. He questioned himself if its attributes were on par with him. If that was the case, then there was no way to fight it by overpowering its attributes. Liu mockingly called him a good-for-nothing fish and told him to step aside. She also said that she should be the one to take care of such a powerful opponent. She attacked it with her maximum power from her sword, but it succeeded to defeat itself. Ye Qing shouted at her to control the first domain. The monster kept on attacking her. She stood up and realized that it wouldn't help, and she was still too weak. In the next scene, she was standing in front of a giant hole with blue light coming out of it. Her guards came and told her that they had detected the energy level of that abyss, and it was very unstable. They asked her if she was planning to go on her own. In response, she said that her goal was to finally conquer that place, the dark utmost level of the Tower of the End. She had bandages all over her arms and body. There was also a band-aid on her right cheek. She exclaimed that her current growth rate was still far behind that of her older brother and sisters. She then denied her statement and said to herself to be precise, but she couldn't even reach them. She told herself that she couldn't even crush the abyss with ease, and she won't be worthy to inherit the Liu family name. She attacked the monster and crashed it on the ground. Everyone was astonishingly looking at her, and she received a flag of frost that was vertical and blue in color. The system splendidly told her that the speed of all allies within a radius of 30 meters would be increased by 50%. The forest domain had specialized in restraining liquid-type monsters. Even if it couldn't be killed, it would cease to be a threat if it was completely frozen. She attacked the giant monster that looked frozen. It was a comet strike. Ye Qing realized that it was the legendary S-rank God-chosen job. He mumbled that he was looking forward to knowing who was stronger, the king-level Blood Nightmare or the God-chosen knight Liu Xingran. Liu said that even though she was an S-rank, her strength still couldn't be compared to that of her older brothers and sisters. She further added that even though she also had the surname Liu, she always felt like she was being left behind. She was the weakest member of the Liu family. She was always the person who was laughed at and ridiculed. She had heard from her family that she was simply the disgrace of the Liu family. How could they have a sister so weak and no one wanted to live like trash? They used to laugh at her and ask her to stay at home, and that the abyss was very dangerous for their little sister. Because of all that mocking, she wanted to become stronger, even if she had to start from a novice abyss. As long as she continues challenging greater difficulties, she will be able to surpass them someday. To surpass everyone, she should be able to face every challenge on her own. In the next attack, Liu fell on the ground with blood coming out of her mouth. The girl screamed that it had even defeated Liu Xingran, who was an S-rank hunter, and they should probably run. The monster came forward to attack Ye Qing. He attacked back with fire flames at it. The system observed its eye and detected that it was his weakness perception. He said if that monster had reached king level, it would gain resistance to abnormal conditions. If the level was high enough, it would even become completely immune to freezing, dizziness, paralysis, slowness, and even some places that were originally weak points would no longer be its weaknesses at its level would be increased. There was no point in holding back anymore. He was ordered to activate all attributes and attack the monster. The girl was amused and said that it was very fast, while Leo was drinking a green liquid from a bottle. The monster threw him away on the other side. He got frustrated and said that as long as he could find the weakness of that king-level blood nightmare, he would achieve his goal. No matter which part he destroyed, it would regenerate. He had also not observed any weakness throughout its whole body. He also said that the monster seemed to be remotely controlled by something. He then realized what he had just said. He asked for the block that was being called a rock tablet before. He said that when the cube was removed, a blood test appeared indicating that the cube had something to do with the blood nightmare. He asked them to kick it towards him. The guy with horns on his helmet kicked the block towards him. There was some ancient writing on the block. The message popped up on the system that his intelligence check was passed. He could then decipher ancient writing on glyph blocks. The system also told him that he could decode the ancient incantation on the glyph block to lift the blood curse. Ye Qing sighed and said that the solution was right in front of their eyes, if only he had known to use the observing eye from the start. The monster snatched the block from him and ate the entire block, activating invincible mode in it. Everyone started asking why it had not moved, and it looked quite scary by not moving. Ye Qing sighed in frustration that it had entered the invincible mode. Liu came to him and asked if she had seen somewhere before. When she entered, she thought he looked familiar. He exclaimed in surprise that she had never actually recognized her. He then told her that they met in the Abyss 2 years ago. He was the scavenger who took away her experience point. He further said that it was the first experience that he had earned in his life. She replied by saying that the 29.5 points from the monster and the person who picked up the 0.5 points she missed. She then remembered him and asked what his name was again. She called him Ye Qing, which means a one-night stand. He then told her his name was Ye Qing. She relayed to him that she had never thought that he would succeed in changing. He proudly told her that was a level 1 scavenger then. She started to stare at him and thought that he was always risking his life for experience and accumulating points bit by bit, and he had already become that strong. He asked her why she was looking at him that way. She replied to him that saying it out loud was too shameful. She then slammed the sword on the ground and informed everyone that the block would circulate within the Blood Nightmare's body. Her frost control over the frost domain could briefly freeze it for some while. She ordered Ye Qing to use that brief period of time to locate the block. In response, he said that no matter who it was, there would always be a time when a single person couldn't handle a challenge on their own. He further said to her to count that as her 0.5 reward. He asked her to work together to defeat that monster. She warned him by saying he better not hold her back. The team members behind asked them to wait. They also wanted to join that battle with them. The guy with horns on his helmet said that even though they would not be of much help, he wanted to fight with all he'd got. Ye Qing replied, telling all of them to go together and they would definitely get out alive. He located the block in the stomach of the monster and it had started grumbling in its stomach. He said that there were still 5 seconds until its invincible mode was lifted. The monster was entering a berserker stage and would rampage for the next 30 seconds. He told everyone to listen up to him. Those were the final 30-second opportunity they would have, and they must return alive that time. Everyone started screaming that they must come back alive. Their intelligence check was triggered, and the spirit mood was successfully activated. Leo's spirit mood also got activated. Her fatigue value was minus 100%, and her magic value recovery speed was plus 15%. It would last for the next 30 seconds. She then said that it turned out she couldn't underestimate even a trash character. She called everyone out as soldiers and told them to keep the monster's hatred down. The horn helmet guy went in front of the monster and told it to look towards him. The monster immediately attacked him. Liu called out the girl. Apparently her name was Mage. She told her to target the monster's newly generated tentacles and cover the scavenger. Ye Qing said that the glyph block was the key to ending the blood trial. He further said that if it was destroyed by the fireball, then the trial would never end. Liu asked him what they should do then. He then thought that he could take it out by his hand. She shockingly said that there was no way he could remove it by his hand. She asked him if he was planning to dive into the stomach of the blood nightmare. He responded by saying that more specifically, he was going to penetrate the monster's body. She then commanded the archer to target the roof and shoot down the rocks to create the steps he could jump on. The archer then targeted the roof. Liu then said that she would freeze the lower half of the blood nightmare. She was saying the rest, but before her sentence was completed, Ye Qing said to leave that on him. They both went running to attack the monster. He told her that his super regeneration abilities could instantly heal minor wounds. He further told her that he could ignore small attacks from the Blood Nightmare. She attacked the minister with her blue flag and told Ye Qing to target the chest area as it was easier to penetrate. He said that he wasn't fast enough. Then he drank a purple potion that increased his berserker mode speed to plus 20%. His toxic evolution was triggered, and the potion effect was reversed that increased his speed by 15%. He thought that the potion cards he picked up at the entrance of the abyss could finally be put to use. He was granted a bonus effect that was skin hardening, and his defense was increased by 15%. He flew towards the monster, screaming that it was his finishing blow, but the monster attacked him back several times, and he was thrown far away by the monster. Blood was coming out of his mouth. He exhaled and said that his showing off had failed. He called himself a piece of trash and said that he should have kept a low profile. He was commanded to activate his recycling abilities, but that time the recyclable target was himself. Everyone was shook and started asking where did that come from. He was informed by the system that it was unable to recycle living organisms and his recycling failed. He responded that if he couldn't be recycled, then he should be thrown out vigorously, with all its strength. The system threw him so hard on the monster that he was able to penetrate and got the rock from the monster. He then started reading the spell written on the rock. After the spell was complete, the blood trial had ended. Everyone started questioning what had just happened and if they had won. The system gave the message of level up. Everyone got excited and started celebrating among themselves. Their strength, agility, intelligence, will, constitution, and luck all were increased. Liu was shocked that she had just leveled up, but Ye Qing failed to level because he was already at his maximum level. There was real treasure all around to collect. Ye Qing picked a card of sword, but it required at least level 10. The system informed him that his level does not meet the requirements. He exclaimed that his maximum level was only 1. It meant that all the flashy equipment before his eyes was useless to him. He got sad and wanted to try them so badly. Liu told him that as the one who had passed the blood trial, he was the greatest contributor, so he should be the one to distribute those items. He giggled while saying that it was nothing. He then told her that there was something he needed to trouble her with. On the other side, there were thousands of guards standing behind the gate of the abyss. One of the guards said to contact the headquarters and prepare to send a rescue team there. Liu got out of the gate and said that there was no need to do that. Everyone outside got curious to talk to her. There were reporters spreading the news that as expected of Miss Xingran, and that she had successfully cleared an abyss on her own. They all excitedly welcomed her back. Liu responded to everyone by saying that it was right. She further added that what could there possibly be that she couldn't do alone? She was an S rank after all. All the other team members slid from the side saying that they would keep that a secret. Previously, Ye Qing told her that her Leo group shouldn't be short of money. He then asked her if it was possible he could sell those items to her with a discount, which was, he would charge her just 500 magic crystals. She agreed with him. He then continued talking and said that there was one more thing. When she would leave, he wanted her to treat him as if he weren't there, and the abyss was cleared by her alone. She got confused but later agreed with him. He asked everyone else to go ahead and he would slip out secretly later. Liu started thinking that Ye Qing was planning to make her owe him a favor. On the other side, Ye Qing went to the place where that rock was present. He sat down, stared at it for a while, and with his powers, snatched out a tiny blood nightmare from it. He then started to talk to it, saying that even something as weak as it wouldn't want to be like trash and let others step on it. He asked it to become its strength. He completely took the blood nightmare out and threw it towards the hand of the system. The system successfully recycled the blood nightmare. The abilities gained by the blood nightmare's body were consuming life essence to summon a nightmare clone. The clone could imitate the host and could deal and receive damage once. The clone would dissipate immediately after the effect was activated, and this ability could be upgraded. Its cooldown time was 30 seconds. Ye Qing got happy and said that in the further battles, he would be looking forward to working with it. He went to the main system operation unit, where there were several screens to get information from. He sat on a chair with a screen in front of it, and started to swipe different cards present on it. He mumbled that he had given all the items with higher level requirements to Liu Xingran. But then he thought that an unknown scavenger with lots of flashy equipment in hand would definitely be noticed by the group of supervisors. On the contrary, those pieces of trash were so inconspicuous that the supervisors wouldn't bother caring even if he would sell them secretly. He sighed and said that he was overthinking and no one would buy that trash from him. He then tapped on the recyclable option on the screen. The equipment was recycled and he earned 1 basis point. He got confused and asked himself if he had accidentally decomposed it. The screen gave him the message that recycling was processing and had sorted the trash after preliminary classification. After that, the crushing, smelting, and separating it into materials could be recycled. It further told him that the basic point was a universal substance extracted after decomposing useless equipment, which could be used to upgrade, repair, and create new ideas. He was reading that all while sipping on his juice and asked if those trash pieces of equipment could be decomposed. The screen gave him a task to complete the repair of the ordinary dagger that cost 5 basic points. He got the dagger in his hand, then questioned if he needed to complete the task by following the hints. The remaining durability was 0.33. He had almost thrown it away after killing the boss. If he could count the basic points from the accidental decomposition, then he still needed 4 basic points, which meant that he just needed to decompose 4 more weapons. The system gave him several messages like he had successfully decomposed a broken spare. He earned 1 basis point from it. He had also successfully decomposed a rusted 2-handed sword, loose wooden shield, and a curled broad blade knife. He had earned 1 basic point from each decomposition. He then got the information about the ordinary dagger. Its durability was 34/34. Level requirement was level 1, available attacks were 22, and its repair reward was maximum weapon durability +1 and attack +1. After getting to know all that, he realized that not only was the weapon repaired, but its durability and attack had also been slightly enhanced. In other words, as long as these were constantly worn out and repaired, even trash weapons could be enhanced. It seemed to him that the trash equipment had to be tempered to be enhanced. The system congratulated him on completing the tutorial and asked him to select a reward. He was given a choice between a novice blueprint, which was a magical convenient potion that could instantly recover one's mana, while removing a large amount of fatigue, or a random attribute value of +2. He chose a convenient magical potion blueprint. He recalled himself that at that moment, attribute points were not scarce for him. What he worried about most when venturing into the abyss was that he couldn't predict its depth, and many adventures which were not prepared often run out of magic points before finding the boss room, and they had to retrace their steps to return and resupply. As a result, magic bottles were often key props for a group's survival, and the value of those bottles spoke for itself. The hint given by the system was a congratulation note on learning item regeneration, and the convenient magical potion regeneration requirement was 6 basic points in a random container. Ye Qing got confused on a container and said that he was not surprised that regenerating an item required basic points, but why was a random container needed? He kept thinking, and then finally he went to the cafe guy and asked for a container. He then kept 3 cups in front of him along with his juice cup, and started thinking and said that the trash had been completely recycled, and the next step was regeneration. Then he asked himself if there was also a mini-game. He started putting power to those cups, and at that time there was someone who was constantly looking at him from the back. He sighed and continued saying that it was expected from a recycled item that it looked weird, but it was not like it was unusable. He drank a first sip of the potion he just made, which made him gain 5 times more of the convenient magical potion, but he blew it out saying that it tasted like some sort of rancid juice. From that potion, his magic value was increased, and fatigue value was decreased. He felt like his magic had been restored, and his physical fatigue was gone. He went from there and said he should be able to clear 1 more abyss that day. As he stepped out, some guards came to him and asked if he was Ye Qing. One of them said that only a few days had passed and his aura had completely changed. He further said that he couldn't have picked up some treasure while scavenging for trash. He continued saying that he had looked for him for a while and almost reported him as missing a few days back. Ye Qing responded by saying that he had paid off all his debts, and he even paid the interest in full, and asked him not to bother him anymore. The guard called him a scatter, and asked if he thought that was all. He also said that he might have paid off all his debts, but his work contract hasn't expired yet. He mocked him, and told him that he should not forget that a trash picker should live like a trash picker. He elaborated that to look at himself, pretending to be cool. He queried who he was trying to impress. He slapped him, dropped his cup of potion, and made fun of him, saying how blind he could be, and mockingly said that he had spilled his brown sugar pearl extra-large cup. He questioned him if he was aware of the consequence of a level 0 knocking over a B-rank job changer. The other guard said that he had always found him unpleasant to look at. According to the supervision regulations for job changers, using their abilities was forbidden outside the abyss. The only ones allowed to activate their abilities outside the abyss were law enforcers and special armed personnel. Ye Qing had to find a blind spot of the security cameras to activate his recycling and regeneration abilities. The guard taunted him by saying that he should pick up the pearls on the ground and eat them one by one, then lick the pool of milk tea clean. He jeered at him by saying that he was assigning him that job of picking up trash as if it was a rare job opportunity for him. Ye Qing refused to do that. The guard got angry and called out Caesar. Rodrigo Caesar was from the S-rank hunting group with a blood oath. He came, grabbed the guard's tie, and asked in a threatening way if he had gathered enough people. He replied by saying that they are short of just one person. He questioned him about where the last person was. He saw Ye Qing and told him that he was hired. The guard laughed and said that he was just a trash picker, and the type of person he wanted must be someone who could fend for themselves. He was going to find one for him that instant. Caesar responded by saying that when entering the abyss under the Red Moon state, all the monsters would be extremely ferocious. What he needed was someone who could be used as cannon fodder. As for strength, it doesn't matter to him. During the Red Moon, the monsters in the abyss would be entered in a berserk state. Rare monsters would also respawn in the abyss. The rewards dropped by monsters would have been doubled, and the quality of the magic crystals dropped would also be purer. Ye Qing agreed and said that he would join. Caesar appreciated his decision and called him a tactful guy. He called everyone to him. In the group of people, there was also Lao Chen, who was in shock after looking at Ye Qing and called him trash. Ye Qing made him quiet and took him to the side and told him to think before he spoke. Lao Chen wondered if he was hallucinating or if it was really him. Ye Qing stated that if he had not borrowed everyone's strength at that time, they all would have died in there. It was still thanks to him that he was alive. Caesar inquired if they both already knew each other. Ye Qing answered that they don't know each other. He replied back by saying that it made sense. He further added that how a person who had killed his own teammates could have real friends and walk past them. Ye Qing then asked Lao Chen how he got out of there. Lao Chen countered that the committee had originally planned to sentence him to 15 years, but he sacrificed all his assets and paid a fine of 1.5 million to be freed. He added further to it that all because of him, he was penniless and had lost all of his levels, and he could only start from scratch as a cannon fodder. He threatened him by saying that if he doesn't pay back his levels, he would report him to the World Committee. Ye Qing dared him to say one more thing, then he would actually turn him into leftovers and recycle him. They went to the Sea City subway, where the Red Moon was clearly visible. There was a group of people who were welcome to the cannon fodder team. One of the guys asked to tell them about their jobs. He himself was a level 3 scavenger, and his name was Bard Zhou Tong. Ye Qing told them he was a level 1 scavenger. Chen was a level 1 mage, and his full name was Chen Xingdian. Zhou Tong said that it was normal, and they were all trash there, so they wouldn't have to make fun of each other. He further added that they were all there to exchange their lives for money. He also asked if there was anything more noble than that to them. He sighed and said that it seemed like that trash group was definitely going to follow along. He demanded they allow him to introduce the other 2 cannon fodder teammates. One of them was a level 2 healer, Lao Zhu, and the other was a level 3 warrior, Lao Zhang. Zhou Tong said that they needed to pick a leader for their small cannon fodder team, and as he was a level 3 bard, he thought he was the most suitable for that role. Lao Zhu commented that since Tong had the highest level, they would obey his command. Lao Zong exclaimed that he had no options. Caesar came up and told them that he had to announce something, and that was, in addition to the 6 main members of Blood Oath, there would be 5 temporary members joining them that time. Someone standing behind him warned him not to speak so highly of the cannon fodders. He responded to him by saying that cannon fodders were just cannon fodders. Unlike the rest of the job changers, cannon fodders were just used as bait to reduce their casualties. He then held a red key in his hand while saying that the abyss was in the shape of a maze, with many traps distributed in each room. The cannon fodders were tasked with finding a passage to the boss room as quickly as possible and bringing the information back to the main team. He doesn't expect anyone to have combat abilities. He laughed at them while saying that if they encountered a monster, they should run away. He also mentioned that if they wanted a share of money, at least one of them had to leave alive, and if only one of them would survive, then they would earn all the rewards. Lao Zhu started to cough, on which Caesar asked him if his health was okay. He responded by saying that he couldn't back down, and he still had 4 daughters waiting for dinner at home. Lao Zhang also sighed, and mentioned that his wife was severely ill and he needed the money. Why else would he take the risk there? Everyone was told to proceed towards the gate. Lao Zhang was talking to Lao Zhu. He pointed out to him that Ye Qing looked like a new face. Lao Zhu replied by asking if there weren't always new faces in the cannon fodder field. Zhang meant that the new face looked relaxed, and that was the first time he had seen someone like that. After walking for a while in the abyss, Tong questioned Lao Chen if he had not found it strange that not a single monster had appeared even after walking that far. Lao Chen requested him not to jinx that. Lao Zhu asked why the place had suddenly gone colder. Lao Zhang agreed with him, saying that the temperature had really dropped. Tong uttered that he knew he should have worn more clothes, and asked everyone to continue to move forward. As they were walking, Tong stepped on a tile which made a sound of crack and flew on the top and landed on his head. He started running around saying that his head hurt. Lao Chen yelled at him that he had stepped on a trap. Ye Qing started thinking how he had lived up until then and called him a very careless person. Tong expressed that he was very lucky as he was almost taken out by the mechanism, then enthusiastically said to keep moving forward. Suddenly, some weird creatures in the shape of a giant peanut started falling from the top. Those things were wrapped in white cloth and made a thud sound when they fell on the ground. Lao Tzu asked if those things were alive. In a flash, horns started to come out of those things. They were level 5 demonized spiders. They were also called elite creatures, demon insects, or spitz poisons. Tong gasped that those disgusting insects scared him the most. Lao Chen activated his burn mode, but it doesn't work on them. He got to know that those were elite creatures. Lao Jiang said to allow him to attack those things, and attacked them with his sword and shield. One of the demonized spiders stepped towards Ye Qing and attacked his leg. He stood still and kicked it away, killing the spider. Lao Chen noticed that, and started to wonder why Ye Qing was being so arrogant, and he was nothing but an ability stealer. The system told him that a recyclable demonized spider was found, and if he would like to recycle it. Ye Qing recycled it. That earned him 1 attribute point, and he also obtained 1 arcana quenching poison. When the weapon hit the target, it was accompanied by poison effects. It caused 60% of the weapon's damage within 6 seconds. If the attack caused a critical hit, the total damage was increased to 120% of the weapon's damage. Its requirement was agility value above or equal to 25. That item was a blade type, which was mutually exclusive with vampire types. Arcanas were an additional type of ability that could be used on items and equipment. After 1 use, the arcana disappeared, and the target item equipment would gain the strengthening effects of the arcana until it was destroyed. Arcanas of the same type were not superimposed, but multiple arcanas had fusion characteristics. Ye Qing deliberated that it seemed that he could obtain not only skill cards and job cards from recycling corpses, but arcana cards as well, and that type of card seemed to be able to strengthen equipment. Lao Jiang called him a newbie and queried what he was doing spacing out. If he didn't want to hold everyone back, he could just retreat. Ye Qing responded that he was going. He tried that quenching poisoning on the ordinary dagger. On the other hand, Tong was freaking out that even though he was the highest level bard on the team, what he was scared of telling them was his job had no combat abilities at all, and it could only buff others. The situation they were in was very dangerous. He could only give himself a life-preserving buff first. He mumbled that he was an elegant barn, and during battle every second he should remind himself to be gentle. He doesn't care what that day brought to him. He further thought that monsters or ghosts, all on his territory, would be captured without mercy. He said that all on a mic, everyone was confused about what he was doing. The system mentioned to him that the target was strengthened successfully. Tong whined that he had messed up and strengthened the monster instead, and started to run from there. Everyone was asked to retreat from there. Ye Qing came out running and attacked them with his dagger and killed them all at once. Everyone thought that it was Tong who had killed the monsters, saying that the bard was so strong, and that was exactly what was expected from their leader. Tong asked in a laughing tone if he had done that. He further said that he only planned to activate a buff to put oil on the soles of his feet. Ye Qing wondered that demonized spiders had poison resistance that weakened the effects of poison. It was no wonder that quenching poison was an arcana extracted from the demonized spider itself. If it was used on themselves, the effects definitely wouldn't be obvious, but they were overflowing with just physical damage. The monsters of the abyss had a certain extent of intelligence. If they found the target invincible, they wouldn't initiate an attack. They would turn around and run as their first strategy. The monsters started to tremble. Lao Tzu screamed that the monsters seemed to be retreating. Lao Chen sighed that it was only the first room and it was already terrifying. Ye Qing hadn't dared to imagine what would appear later. He apologized, saying that many quenching poison arcans had already been recycled. He only kept 1 card as a spare. The remaining 27 had all been converted to basic points. He ordered the system to keep 1 card as a space and convert the remaining 27 into basic points. The system hinted to him that 54 basic points were obtained. Tong said that the monsters retreated and asked everyone to move forward. He mentioned to everyone that their mission was to venture further inside, and they must be careful further on and not to trigger any more traps. Ye Qing mumbled if he was talking about himself. They saw a mirror-type entrance on one wall. The hidden berserk area was found. Due to the influence of the red moon, new branches were appearing in the dungeon. Ye Qing asked if he should be trying to explore that branch. He summoned the Blood Nightmare that took the complete appearance of him. He asked the Blood Nightmare to talk with others for a while. He would catch up later. The Blood Nightmare went to them. Tong asked where he had been. He told it not to fall behind, otherwise they would not know how he died. They all went to the hidden berserk area, and Ye Qing went into the hidden berserk area where there was a monster. He fought with it for a while, but then he realized that its physical defense had made it almost completely immune. The monster threw him on the ground. It was a level 20 broodmother, known as Rare Elite. The broodmother was a type of spider monster found in games like Grounded. Ye Qing got excited and said a Rare Elite had actually appeared. If he could kill it, then he would be able to obtain rare level recyclables. He attacked the monster with the great flame explosion that made a blast, but it was not affected. He realized that it had fire resistance immunity, so he could not use that attribute to his advantage at all. If that was the case, then he would just kill it directly. He took out his poison dagger and attacked the monster. The system informed him that it had critically hit on the weakness, and the monster roared loudly. He reflected that while the level 5 demonized spider seemed to possess venomous bites, it seemed like the level 20 broodmothers lost that along with their resistance to poison, and surprisingly, it became a weakness. He assumed it was due to the changes in their defenses and their ability to breed, and no longer relying on their own abilities to hunt. They could just send out the demonized spiders to do the hunting. Even more ironic was that those spiders then used to become its greatest weakness throughout their own poisoning. He was thinking this all while the monster was being poisoned. Ye Qing had not expected to have that option available. The monster then caught him in a spiderweb-like trap that slowed him down. He ordered the berserk mode to be activated and freed himself from the trap. He then punched the monster on its face. The system informed him that the berserk mode could be leveled, and asked him to choose from the 2 routes. One of them was the splattering gore, that would increase the effectiveness of berserk mode. His physical attack might ignore a portion of the enemy's resistances, but in exchange, his health would slowly drain until he was dead, or till the duration ended. The other was unyielding rage that would increase the duration of berserk mode and halved its cooldown. He speculated that typically people would pick unyielding rage as it was a more stable choice, but he was running into a monster with high resistances like Broodmother there. If he chose the splattering gore option, he would no doubt be able to strengthen berserk, but that health drain was a bit too crippling of a side effect. He picked the splattering gore and thought that with regeneration on him, he would be able to counteract the side effects. With the splattering gore activation, he would be able to harm those with strong physical resistances. It was the selling point of that card. He had many cards in front of him and he chose to take those. Those were the equipment he could bring back from the Abyss as an official member, especially the one he could sell for 15000. The system recycled the rest. He obtained 20 attribute points and wondered what sort of skill he would be getting. He obtained the rare card that was a Broodmother. It could summon up to 4 demonized broodling to fight alongside him and could evolve according to combat experience. He surprisingly read the card asking that a summon could choose its own evolution. On the other side, Tong, along with the other team members, reached a mine. He shockingly said that he had not thought they would come across a mine in the Abyss. Lao Zu held a crystal in his hand and asked not to mention highly concentrated S-rank magic crystals too. Was that another influence of the Abyss during the Red Moon state? Lao Chen told him that each one cost a fortune. Lao Zu had an Eye of Argos in his hand that was a long stick with an eye at one end. Eye of Argos marked the surrounding 60-meter radius that allowed nearby adventures to be notified on the map. Lao Chen yelled at him asking if he was stupid. With those, they could have lived the rest of their lives showered in cash. He questioned why he was marking it for those people. Lao Zu replied by saying to forget about enjoying the riches, they would be in trouble staying alive if they would find out they had been hogging them for themselves. Lao Zhang came and commented that after all, the job of Team Cannon Fodder there was to pave the way for the higher-ups. He added further that if they died there, they would just label them as an accidental casualty, and no one would blink an eye. Lao Chen got frustrated and kicked Lao Zu away from him, saying to get out of his way. No one would care about trash like him, and repeated that all again. The hand of the system gave him an electric shock. He started murmuring that it was all because of Ye Qing, and even all of his levels had been wiped out, as long as he could get some cash on his hands. He held a crystal in his hand and continued saying that if he could get good gear to cover his stats, he could get into the main forces of the scavenger groups. He said it was fine if he would just sneak out with a few crystals. The system activated the trap mode, and a red beam of light came striking from the sky and attacked on Lao Zu's forehead. In the hidden berserk area, Ye Qing got the demonized broodling. He looked at it and said that the level 1 broodling seemed pretty weak to him, as it was with no combat abilities. The system told him that it could grow into a level 5 demonized spider with basic points, and if he wanted that thing to survive on the battlefield, he should at least get that level 5. He agreed on tossing in the points. The demonized broodling evolved into a silk spider that had learned the spin web. On the contrary, Lao Zu had died. Lao Chen said that it was just an accident. Lao Zhang held his collar, screaming that his greed had killed Lao Zu. He told him that Lao Zu was the pillar supporting his whole family, and he had worked himself to death to provide for his family. He blamed that he was dead because of Lao Chen. Lao Chen yelled back by saying if it was wrong for him to earn money, and if he had not dropped to the first level, he had been living well by then, but he still had to hang around with them. Lao Zhang called him a team killer in frustration and was about to attack him with the sword, but Tong saved him. A team killer was referred to someone who had killed their own teammates in a game. Lao Chen lashed out at him that it was not like he was any better. In that dog-eat-dog world, power and wealth were the only things of value. Otherwise, it was just luck. Caesar applauded from the back and said that he liked his view of things. He asked him if he had any interest in joining the Blood Oath, as they had space for one more. His guard told him that Lao Zu's blood was still warm. He responded by saying that death was a common sight there. Just like Lao Chen had said, powerless people could only exchange their lives for money, and wanting to earn money was not something shameful. As for dying, that was not something shameful either. He further added that as for those magic crystals that only appear during the red moon, they were worth whole cities. He told him to bring one out and he was set for life. He remembered that he had forgotten to tell him that the price of taking away one of those crystals required someone to offer up a humble life that was a worthless life, and he went away. There was a ginormous monster standing in front of him with a giant sword in his hand. He told them what his boss meant was that they all were in charge of picking the magic crystals on the walls and throwing them into his basket there. The guards said that if they would run, they would be dead meat. Lao Zhang grumbled that they could get killed with every crystal they would pick. He asked if that was any suicide mission. Caesar mocked him, saying, "Doesn't his wife urgently need money for that treatment of hers?" He inquired if he was joking when he told him that he would put his life to earn enough money for her treatment. He warned him to remember it was not a shameful thing to exchange that useless life of his for money. As Lao Zhang was about to pick up the first crystal, he stopped and apologized that he couldn't do that. He started crying and said he'd be honest. He had gambled away too much money and had only come to pay debts, and he doesn't want to die. Caesar called him useless as expected. Lao Chen thought that he completely outclassed him. He wouldn't be a match for him even when he had his full powers. He called Caesar a big brother and asked if he had just told him about the Blood Oath recruiting and said if he was interested. He further told him that he was just a fire mage, but he would like to join. He replied by asking if he had said something like that. The other guy reminded him that he had said that and mockingly called him a big brother. He commanded Lao Chen to go towards him. Lao Chen bent on his knees, saying that he was willing to sacrifice his life for him. Caesar taunted him, saying if he had really thought he was something. He further added that he would not let a piece of trash like him enter into his group of elites. He called him a good-for-nothing team killer and said that he would have been sentenced to death in no time. He was just making his death have a bit more value. He asserted that it was okay if they were angry, but they wouldn't leave that place alive and he would turn them all into corpses. Then he would let the necromancers control them to collect those magic crystals. After all, they had all died once already. A few more times was not a big deal. Meanwhile, Ye Qing came and captured back the blood nightmare. Tong was going to shut Caesar's mouth, but Ye Qing stopped him, telling him not to be rash, and asked him to leave it on him and wait over there. He went in front and queried how dangerous it was to collect those crystals. One of the guards mockingly asked what kind of trash had appeared at such a time. He removed one crystal from a giant rock. The guard shouted at him to tell them before he took one out. He would kill all of them. The guard questioned if a death trap was useless against him, or was it that the trap was useless after it was activated once? Ye Qing replied that even if it was a death trap, if he was lucky enough to fulfill the requirements, he wouldn't have died, but instead, he would be only wounded, or there might even be no effect. His lucky star should just be reach the threshold for there to not be affected. The system gave a notice that the trap had not been activated. Caesar said that the trap was working after all. His luck was just a lot higher than 60 points. The guard posed a question if it was possible for a level 1 scavenger to have over 60 luck. He continued that for most job changers, their luck would not increase by itself, and there was only one possibility that the death trap had failed. He mentioned that it had happened twice already, and that must have happened again. He took the crystal out of the rock and said to look that nothing had happened. The red light came striking and hit his head and killed him. Caesar said that discounting all other possibilities, the person called Ye Qing standing in front of them must have a luck stat higher than normal people. He further said it could be a rare trait related to his job. In the Abyss, it was more common for his power-related stats to increase. He asked him if he had used all of his chances to grow on something as useless as his luck stat. He responded that he just divided up the points equally. After listening, he said that the original plan was to turn them all into corpses he could use, but they would be having a change of plan. He only needed one corpse with a high enough luck stat and would get rid of the rest of the corpse. He ordered the guards not let even a single person escape. Lao Zhang said they were done for. Their opponents were qualified members of the Blood Oath. He asked how those cannon fodders could stand up to them. Tong reminded them that they still had time to run. Lao Chen started running away with a crystal in his hand. Ye Qing questioned what he was running for. They had got the numbers on their side. Lao Zhang said that not anymore. They were then short on one. He responded that they were not short on men. The guards started talking to each other if they had heard something. A group of creatures came running in front of them. Everyone started screaming that there were monsters in there. Lao Zhang worriedly said that it was bad. Not only they had content with enemies, but there were monsters as well. Ye Qing said that he had picked up a few spiders on the way, and they were on their side. Lao Zhang mockingly asked him since when he could control spiders. One of the guards was enemy necromancer level 20, and the other one was enemy berserker level 17. The third one was enemy hunter X2 level 18, and the fourth one was the enemy paladin level 19. Ye Qing was not entirely sure of the gap between the humans and his monsters, but his gut feeling was that they would not be much of an issue. The system was unable to identify human enemies who were close in power. Caesar queried if Ye Qing could control the abyssal monsters. He spoke to him that he looked like he had got his own tricks through scavenging here and there. Ye Qing thought that in that case, that guy would not be that much lower than him in stats, and possibly even higher than him. Caesar warned him that if his monsters were not more than level 10 monsters, they would not be even worth mentioning. He commanded him to clean up the monsters first and then silence them. He asked him to be careful not to chip the crystals. Ye Qing told Lao Chen that he had changed the plans. If he didn't want to die, he should have followed the directions. Lao Zhang commented that he knew Ye Qing was sacrificing himself to stall them like that, but he was fine with it because he knew he could do that himself. Ye Qing talked to Tong, saying he was sure he had got his own goals for exploring the abyss. He further told him if he doesn't want to die, then he should start running. Tong told him that he would never forget his sacrifice and ran away from there. He got hurt while running, on which Lao Chen screamed at him and asked what he had done. He apologized and said that ever since he had entered the abyss, it had been one lucky thing after another. He wasn't sure why. Enemy Paladin attacked the monster with a hammer and said that he would send those trash mobs off one hammer at a time. The monster attacked him by spitting spiderwebs from its mouth on his entire face. Ye Qing came and saved him, on which he yelled, questioning if he was trying to take on a level 19 at his level. He said he must be dreaming and threw him away from his shield bash. He told him that his spiders were only level 10 and they were good enough to scatter their forces. He further continued that against an organized group like the Blood Oath, it was still not enough. He took out his dagger and injured both of his legs, and blood started to come out from the side of his legs, and they both started fighting. An archer came and asked if Ye Qing had dodged. The other archer said it doesn't seem like that and told him that he probably wasn't aiming right. He told him to adjust his speed and try again. He targeted him again and attacked him right, but this time Ye Qing had split the arrow in two with his dagger, on which the archer remarked that he had intercepted that time. With his great flame explosion, Ye Qing had burst the ground where the both archers were standing. They both said that he was very tough. In the next scene, the enemy berserker of level 17 had knocked out a monster. He then stepped towards Tong to attack him with his giant sword, on which he said not to come after him, as he hadn't attacked him. Lao Zhang then came in between and shouted at him to get out of the way. He yelled at Tong that it was all because of him that they couldn't escape. He proceeded to say that if he doesn't want to die, then he should get up and fight. Lao Zhang was saving himself through his shield, but instead, he was knocked out on the ground with blood coming out of his mouth and eyes. He then got up and said that he shouldn't have come to the abyss. He also said that he was fated to die anyway. He yelled at him that debts were wiped clean after death, and it must be painless and quick. He ordered him to go and kill him. As the enemy berserker picked up his giant sword in the air, his hand froze, and he was not able to move at all. He saw Tong standing behind him, and wondered if he had done that. Tong was amazed by himself that debuff was on the correct target that time. He used an immobilization technique. He called out Lao Zhang by the name Lao Li, and asked him to kill him then, but he told him that he was frozen too. Ye Qing wondered what they were doing. Enemy necromancers came and said even if they had some powerful hidden ability, there was always a limit to their powers, and they could not withstand high demands all the time. Ye Qing thought that summoning was a spell that continuously consumed magic resources. When he had summoned clones before, a lot was already consumed, and summoning spiders also continued to consume mana. He created a magic drink and started sipping it, on which the enemy necromancer asked what drink was that, and he didn't care what he drank as it was too late for him to replenish his mana anyway. A necromancer was a very powerful S-rank job. Before the creature was controlled by, necromancy was completely dismembered, and they would fight endlessly. Ye Qing got shocked on controlling the corpses. As he finished his drink, his mana was fully replenished, and the dead would be at peace and rest there. The corpse was taken away by the system's hand. Necromancer got frustrated and asked what evil technique he had used and where had his corpse gone. He attacked Ye Qing and started fighting with him. Caesar came in between, stopped their fight, and talked to Ye Qing, saying that his tricks were quite interesting. No wonder he had caught his eye in front of that drink shop. Ye Qing responded that if everyone had just made a little money and went their own way, they would be just fine. He continued saying, but he wanted to exchange human lives for crystals. That had already offended him, especially being treated as a cannon fodder. Caesar taunted him that he thought he could stop being cannon fodder just because he had a little potential. He mocked him by saying what a joke. He further added that they were all rotten subordinates of his. Then he asked if he was still pretending to be the good guy. He reminded him that it was a world that had eaten people, and only those who were ruthless could stand high. Tong begged not to kill him as he was just a handyman. Caesar made a judgment that from the current situation they were in, it was absolutely impossible for those cannon fodders to make it out of the abyss with them. Lao Jiang shouted not to listen to Caesar. He continued that from the moment they had rebelled against them, it was impossible to get out alive. He ordered them to pick up their swords and kill him. Tong held his sword and shakenly said that he was just there for support as he couldn't even kill a monster, let alone a person. Caesar told them that one of his sides was about to get destroyed. Ye Qing laughed and said that he doesn't get his point. All he knew was that everyone had the right to enter the abyss and to make it out alive. Caesar called him naive and punched him on his stomach. Ye Qing flew away and fell on the ground. He understood that Caesar was very strong, and he could just tell from instinct that he was the strongest creature he had ever encountered. He punched Ye Qing again, but that time he defended himself. Caesar then said that anything in front of his strength was trash. Alternatively, Tong called out enemy berserkers and asked if he was being hesitant. He called Tong weak and knocked him on the ground. He was about to attack him with his sword, but Lao Jiang caught him from the back and saved Tong and asked him to do something. Enemy berserker cut a slit on his chest, and he fell on the ground. He repeated to Tong to do something. He called him powerful as he was a leader, and died. Tong felt guilty and got reminded that he had told everyone that they would need a leader for their cannon fodder team, and as a level 3 bard, he was very suitable for that role. He had just thought that he would not have to kill monsters with his own hands if he were the leader. He begged enemy berserkers to spare him as he was just a simple noob and he was not powerful at all. A guy mentioned to him that he was the only guy on the team who had dealt with 0 damage. He asked if he could gain experience by adding buffs. Enemy berserker told him that he couldn't even put a buff on the right target and he had no shame. He told him to get out of their team and left him alone. Caesar came to him and inquired what job he had. He told him that he was a level 3 bard. He asked him to go with him. Unexpectedly, Ye Qing kicked him from the back and they both fell on the other side of the ground. Caesar exclaimed angrily that it was a technique from the martial artist Kang Longjin, which caused continuous physical damage to the target organ. He warned him that if he would use magic after the strike, the injury would deepen, and he might even die suddenly. He further added to it that after all, that blow was a signature combat skill that could cripple even a master of magic. Ye Qing said that it was too fast and he needed to pull away. He started to run back. Caesar followed him, saying if he thought he could run. Ye Qing asked if there was a blood loss debuff when using that skill and said he wanted that pretty badly. He attacked Caesar with his dagger and called out Zhou Tong and fell on the ground. He told him that it was certainly useless to try and rid himself of the past weakness and incompetence, hoping for charity from others. He had dreamed of processing that kind of power more than anyone else, and had also been disappointed by his own incompetence. An octopus-like monster with one eye caught Ye Qing and held him tightly. He continued saying that he was really too useless, but he does not intend to run away because being weak was not something to be afraid of. He further told him that what he should be afraid of most was his heart also becoming weak. Tong gave a thought to it and sighed. The system told him that there was 0 damage dealt. Ye Qing started shouting that he refused and hit the monster with his dagger. He got informed by the system that it was a critical hit and he had dealt with 1 damage. Ye Qing got happy and exclaimed that he had actually succeeded. He said that when he mustered up the courage to take his first step, he knew he had been preparing to become king his whole life, even if he was just a useless trash picker. Tong realized that if he would not become stronger, he would die. He stated that compared to being scoffed at, it was better to disguise himself and avoid fighting. He wanted to become strong. Most importantly, he wanted to become a strong person. Enemy berserker laughed at him and said what a joke. He also said how a mere level 3 could support cuts through his level 17 armor. He would just stand there, and before completing his sentence, Tong threw his sword on the ground. He held his mic and started saying poetry, and it was a great dispersion. Enemy berserker was shocked. Caesar came and asked what happened. Ye Qing said that because he had found the best supporter in the world and summoned the blood nightmare, his inspiration system was obtained. His damage, defense, speed, and resistance all increased by 15%. The blood nightmare went all over the enemy berserker. He tried to let go of it but failed. Caesar punched Ye Qing but missed his shot. Ye Qing mumbled that because of the abundance of magic, the regeneration speed of his body was fast. He activated his berserk mode, splattering gore, and attacked Caesar with it. Caesar wondered why his armor was not working. He thought if it was penetrated by that tattered dagger. Ye Qing reflected that the splattering gore skill that ignored defense had indeed come in handy, but the debuff that made him lose blood was still there. He commented that the battle must be resolved as soon as possible. Caesar found that interesting. He attacked him again with his dagger, but Caesar defended himself and said after 20 years of training how he could lose to a person like him in skills. He flung his hand away and asked if he felt the strength difference between them. He told him that martial artists could advance on the upgrade path and change their jobs to a strength-based destruction king and a skill-based street fighter. But because he doesn't like those weak skill-based styles, he had focused all the points on the destructive power. He punched him with an instant kill, heaven-breaking punch, and threw him on the other side of the ground. But Ye Qing stood back up. Caesar called him stupid and said he wanted to face his instant kill head-on. He laughed and asked him if he really thought he could lose to him in terms of strength. He commanded the system to add all points to strength. The system added 176 free points to his strength. Caesar asked what he had just done. He told him that his strength point value had increased instantly, and his muscle mass had also changed slightly. Caesar laughed and said, "So what?" He explained that though he does not know the impact of martial artists' combat skills regarding destructive power, accumulating 300 free points at once should be enough strength to land one punch. They both punched each other, but Ye Qing knocked Caesar on the ground, and his nose started to bleed. Caesar was in a shock state that how that skillless punch even occurred. Ye Qing punched him again, and said that there would not be any time for him to be shocked, because that battle must end quickly, and told him that from that day onwards, he could join the cannon fodder team. 8 years ago, when Caesar had come there, the first job he had got was to clean all the equipment, and was told that there would be deeper dungeons to fight in later. His boss used to tell him to clean them well, and the rule of the lion-hearted hunters was that the weak were only assigned to shine their shoes. If he wanted to become an official member, he had to prove himself. His boss laughed at him and commented that by the looks of things then, he seemed to be destined to be cannon fodder for the rest of his life. He had thought if he could prove to them that he was not incompetent, he could climb out of the novice ranks. It does not look that hard to him, but a monster attacked him, and he was knocked out on the ground. His mandible was shattered, 8 ribs were broken, the heart was penetrated, and the liver, spleen, and kidneys were all damaged. He was inside a machine that had a glass on all sides, and he was dipped in some blue liquid. The doctor told him that those sets on his body cost a lot of magic crystals. He further told him that abyssal technology could extract value-added cells from abyssal creatures and transplant them into human bodies. Coincidentally, his DNA matched that of the monster. The good news was that he could still live. The bad news was that he would become a mixed breed. He had successfully proved that he was worthy of joining Lionheart as an official member. The monster boss ordered him to put it on and become his extra arm and become his dog. Caesar asked where his teammates were. He told him that they were all dead. He got to know that it was a world that would swallow people whole, and if he failed to prove his worth, then he would be treated as trash. While Caesar was fighting with Ye Qing, he got unshakable and his defense had greatly improved. Destructive power and speed were also greatly increased. He told Ye Qing that the essence of the magic crystals was solidified energy and surging magic power. During the blood moon, those pure magic crystals were especially powerful. Because of the transplanted monster organs, he was also able to absorb the power of the magic crystals. He could even gain power surpassing the boss level of the abyss for a moment. The system hinted that the boss was detected, and Caesar had appeared. Ye Qing's berserk mode had ended, and he had entered a state of exhaustion for 30 seconds. Tong asked him if he was okay. He responded that he was actually recognized as a boost-level monster by the system. He asked what had happened to that guy's body. Caesar noted to him that all he needed to do was to give up human dignity. He had to give up his human body and become a monster without any moral restraint. Caesar had accepted the price of that strength and kept on attacking Ye Qing and slowly turned into an appearance of a monster. He told him that undoubtedly, those trash had no power to fight back against truly powerful players. He further continued that Ye Qing, the name of him with hidden strength, was already much better than his company's. Even he was no match against that and would be killed with one punch. Though he had exhausted all his strength, he still had activated that unshakable power. His body would just unconsciously give in. The weak was coward in front of the strong. That was the unchanging truth. To become strong, he had to show that ugly appearance. He had almost forgotten one little thing. He stepped towards Tong. Tong started to swear that he had not seen a thing about him becoming ugly. He responded to him saying that he had messed up the magic crystal harvesting mission, and he was the last cannon fodder to witness that tragedy. He asked him to let him die a heroic death. Tong told him to wait, and said if he had no choice but to die, he still had something to say. Caesar held his neck and mocked him by calling him a trash bard, and said he talked too much and asked if he had any last words. He responded that he wanted to leave the abyss alive, and he was not the only cannon fodder to witness that tragedy. Ye Qing stood up from the back and thanked the bard he bought some more time. His exhaustion was just cancelled by that drink. He held the blood nightmare on his finger, and said that it was impossible to gain insight into their body by simply relying on his observing eye. so he had to rely on the characteristics of his blood nightmare to obtain hidden information by coming into contact with his body. Caesar asked the blood nightmare if the guy he had killed was just a clone, and since when. Ye Qing stated that the price of those Superman-like powers were heavier than he thought. He continued saying that although the combat skills of the Berserker greatly increased his strength in a short period of time, the price of forcibly relying on that power and exceeding physical limits was 30 seconds of exhaustion. But he, blurring the boundaries of human and monster, extended his greedy hands towards the abyss itself, so the abyss would have naturally wished for him to pay the price. Caesar directed him not to joke like that. That was his own power. He asked what the abyss had to do with it. He got bigger and attacked Ye Qing, but the change in body shape had decreased his speed. They both kept on fighting. Ye Qing sighed and asked if he had a weapon at that moment. Tong called him out and threw his dagger towards him. Ye Qing caught it and attacked Caesar on his back. Caesar asked in anguish if every hit was a critical one. Ye Qing warned him not to forget he was still someone he couldn't even bother with, and he had added only a few points to his agility. Caesar yelled at him that humiliating him would only make his death worse, as he was of a higher existence than him. Ye Qing punched him with a fire flame on his face, asking what higher existence is. In his eyes, he was 100% a monster. Caesar got angry and had mutated completely. Ye Qing said that he was already in too deep and there was no saving him. He asked Caesar if he had heard the call of the abyss. Caesar got frustrated and yelled at him to go and die, and asked not to drag him down. He commented that he had already proven his worth, so why doesn't he let him go? He was not a cannon fodder and he should not die. Tong stated that he had completely gone insane, and then was their chance. He called Tong the team leader and told him that his body had been swapped by the blood nightmare. Tong thought he was a goner. The system gave them a challenge to win the battle without killing Caesar, and they would obtain rare rewards. Ye Qing got worried that how was that possible? He said Caesar would not make out alive. Not even his teammates would let him go so easily if they saw him like that. He then realized if he would complete that challenge, he could obtain rare rewards, and he should at least give that a shot. The blood nightmare warned Tong to remember his words to find a way to get his attention, and 5 seconds were enough. Ye Qing said that there was no need to kill him. Monsters belong in the abyss, and monsters cannot leave the abyss. Those who had given up in humanity and fell into the abyss would also welcome them with open arms. That was the regulation of the abyss. Ye Qing had heard that monsters enter a berserk state during the blood moon. But during that blood moon, what was given into insanity was a person. On the contrary, Lao Chen came and said that it was really a mess. He would have a great fortune if he had survived. He greedily continued that it was finally his turn to achieve great fortune. He found a treasure box and said that it was full of treasure, and he was finally rich. He had got freedom, equipment, and a new identity. He was laughing and saying that he could change his life against his fate. Little he knew Caesar was behind him in the form of a giant monster. On the other side, Tong was begging Ye Qing to let him call him boss, and he would follow behind him onwards. Ye Qing responded that he could not do something as big as that. Tong said since he heard that Ye Qing had been preparing to become a king his whole life, he had been determined to follow him for all his life. Ye Qing sighed that he was just pretending to look cool at that time. Looking back at that then, he was spouting nonsense about all that. Tong exclaimed that absolutely not. He continued saying that only with his encouragement, he had discovered his own worth and the goal he was striving for. Ye Qing asked about his future plans. Tong asked if he had said that he was the best supporter. Ye Qing shockingly asked when he had said that. Tong wanted to become the king of supporters. Ye Qing thought that Tong was a guy with agility 2 and luck 1. It was amazing that he still had a place on the battlefield. If he would continue to encourage him to fight on the front lines, it would harm him instead. Tong told him to imagine himself in the front, while he would strengthen him from the back and they'd form a team. Ye Qing recommended him not to continue entering the abyss. Tong questioned him why he was saying that. Ye Qing wondered if Tong's ability was only to make others stronger, but he was so weak himself that he needed protection, which was not a qualified support. He apologized to Zhou Tong, saying he does not want him to continue risking his life. He gave his 1,000 magic crystals to him and said that those were all of his magic crystals. They were enough to sustain him for a long time, but he asked to promise him not to step foot into an abyss again. He understood that it was a truth, and Ye Qing said that for his own good, but not matter what. He could not accept himself living like trash in that world. Even if he had died, he doesn't want others to look down on him. Ye Qing found that expression very convincing. It was one that no one could refuse. He questioned him if he could not protect himself. Then how could he protect others? He remembered correctly that Tong's microphone only occupied one of his hands. He took out a sword and told him that it was Lao Li's sword. According to the information Ye Qing had about bards, it was a job that consisted of half magic type and half physical type. Tong could use the magic weapons to cast strengthening and weakening spells he was good at, and he could also master certain attack spells. He told Tong that if he was unable to swing a sword for Lao Li before, he should try his best further on. That was a favor he needed to repay him. Tong held the sword and called Ye Qing boss, saying that he doesn't need those magic crystals. He responded by saying to give those crystals to the families of Lao Li and Lao Ju, and they would earn in the near future anyway. Tong agreed with him. Outside the gate of the abyss, there were 2 men and 1 woman standing outside. The woman said to those men that after the Blood Red Moon incident, squads of S-rank job changers were dispatched to deal with the monsters in the abyss, and within the depths of the abyss, they had discovered 8 bodies identified as belonging to members of Blood Oath. She also informed them that the body of Caesar, who was the leader of the Blood Oath, had transformed into a monster due to the abyssal corruption and had dealt with accordingly. She also informed that they had also discovered additional bodies, with 1 identified. One of the men asked who it was. She told him the one who has been constantly accused of being a team killer during the abyssal invasions. His name was Chun Xing Dian. She further added to it that high-quality equipment was discovered around the time his body was discovered. Presumably, he encountered the mutated corpse of the former squad leader and was killed in combat. It was an unexpected factor, but was still within their calculation. She had all their information written on pages which she handed to the man. The man asked if there was just one factor. She responded that yes, it was just him. One of the man's guards asked her if their plan was a failure. The man replied that Caesar was just a small fry who had failed to establish his usefulness. He also said that they could always look for others like him. In Shenfeng People's Hospital, there was a patient sitting on the floor beside the door, crying with both of his hands on his head. He was constantly asking for forgiveness and was mumbling that he had no choice as a dad but to do that again that time. He had a key inserted in the palm of his left hand. As he took the key out, purple rays were spread all over the place, including outside on the road. People got nervous and started asking around what was going on. Someone shrieked that it was an abyssal gate and asked to contact the officials. 2 people held hands and one of them asked the other to listen to their brother and not to look back. A monster came running to attack them. It was Ye Qing and his sister. Ye Qing yelled out her name and asked her to run. He used to call her Little Joe. They both fell down and Little Joe called her brother out and Ye Qing woke up from his dream. He was on his bed and sweat was dripping on his face. He held his head and screamed, "Not that dream again." He then checked out his phone and remembered that he had almost forgotten about that day. He then went to a flower shop where there was a lady standing on the other side of the counter. He addressed her by calling her Miss Zhang and said that he would like to get a bouquet as usual. She asked him if he was there to visit his little sister Ye. He responded by saying that they had gotten into an unfortunate accident there. She replied that his sister was fortunate to have a brother like him. She also complimented his hair and asked if he had got a haircut and said that it was not looking bad. He told her that when he was on his way, he was stopped by a military buff who addressed little Ye and notified him to check out that new technique he had learned. He replied that he still needed to stop by Miss Zhang for the bouquet. He then inquired if she was setting the other flowers outside and offered to help her out. She thanked him and they both left after a while. As they were about to reach the hospital, Miss Zhang commented that she had been seeing a lot of vehicles headed towards the hospital, and they seemed to be job changers. She asked him if something was going on. Ye Qing shockingly said the hospital and flew on the rooftop of a building. He saw an abyssal gate on the hospital and heard people saying to pull up the speed barricades. He wondered what an abyssal gate was doing there. He went towards the gate where a policeman was standing and warned him that they had urged citizens to stay back, and there was a lockdown in that area. But when he carefully saw Ye Qing's face, he allowed him to enter the gate. Another police officer came and asked him why he had let a random dude pass by him. He responded not to ask him. He further added that the guy along with the folks that had come before were people they should not mess with. The other police officer agreed with him. Ye Qing went inside and started saying to his sister to wait for him, as her brother would not fail her that time. Abyssification had occurred there. The hospital had been transported into another dimension. The space was far beyond anything the hospital would have contained, just like the shopping mall before. Ye Qing reached a room that had been cleared up. He assumed that it was the work of the squad who had come before him. He found a bottle there, picked it up and said that the ones who came before him were well off too, as that bottle was not something any regular job changer could have easily afforded. He ordered it to bring it back to the effective magic bottle. The system told him that the effective magic bottle recovered 85% of MP, removing fatigue. Half consumption occurred in the next 30 seconds. Ye Qing grasped that even if he were to take on the Abyss solo and had to find Little Joe, the magic consumption would be heavy and he had to be well prepared. It appeared that there was a fork. He activated his scouting vision. He came to a place that had 2 directions. He was informed by the system that both paths lead to a point of no return. He had to choose a one-way direction. He recognized that those people had left their marks there, and they seemed to be quite recent too, presumably left by the hunting squad before him. He assumed they were there for the rescue operation as well. He took the other route to increase the chances of little Joe being rescued. He was not sure how much time he would spend there. In the worst case, he would have searched that entire place. He was agitated and said that there was no time to wait around, as an average individual would not survive for long, and he had to hurry and find his sister. He entered into one of the two directions, and the way back from there had been swallowed by darkness and created a barrier that stopped him from turning back. There was a red carpet where he had arrived, and he stated that the brand new carpet indicated that the place had never been visited yet. He used the Eye of Argos and had seen the ability of that prop before. If you were trapped in a maze, you could mark parts of the area on the map, but it was unable to show a map outside that area. He mumbled that no wonder others had used blades to carve marks instead. The system's directional guidance was completely ineffective. That was the so-called abyss of rule. He saw a weird-looking giant thing in front of him on the floor and wondered if that was a trap room, but he did not hear any mechanisms in motion. He held his dagger in his hand and realized that the room was unexpectedly quiet. Suddenly, someone attacked him from the back, but he got alert that instant. He had hit the target back, but it was ineffective. He speculated if the target had physical immunity. The target roared so loud that it made Ye Qing deaf, and he figured out that he would not be able to hear through his ears, and his perception would be greatly reduced. He had almost underestimated the danger of the abyss. What he was facing at that moment was a monster of rule. He remembered he had encountered one 3 years ago. He began recalling that he was at a place where there were only rocks around, and the creatures with wings on their back had started to come out from those rocks. He muttered to himself that those were just statues, and he had thought he needed to fight monsters. He had a box of crystals, and he couldn't waste even one. But when he saw those creatures coming towards him, he got scared, and said if he was mistaken, as they were just on top of that pile of rocks. At that moment, a worker came to him and told him not to turn around. He ordered him to look at those creatures and don't blink. He further told him that those monsters were weeping stone statues. He became frightened and asked what that was, and just hearing the name made his hair stand on end. The worker screamed at him to just look at those monsters and not him. He continued telling him that the monsters of the abyss followed certain rules and logic. The higher the level of the monster, the higher their logic was. The weeping stone statues in front of him were S-class creatures, but they usually did not attack job changers. But their rule was that once someone has started looking at them, their bodies would petrify as statues and lock onto them. And once they shifted their gaze, they rushed towards them at a high speed, enough to kill most job changers in an instant. Ye Qing asked what they should do next. The worker told him to follow his lead and slowly back away until they would be out of the room. He ordered him not to blink. As they were slowly backing up, Ye Qing tripped on a piece of stone and fell, and all the magic crystals in his box were on the floor. The monsters came rushing towards them, but the worker succeeded in closing the door that didn't let the monsters come towards them. The worker joyfully informed him that he was very lucky that time. If he had attacked a weeping stone statue like other job changers had, he would have found that not only could he not cause any damage, but would be killed in an instant. He further added to it that although they were just scavengers with little fighting ability, but when it came to experience, they were not worse than those other job changers. In the hospital abyss, Ye Qing repeated what that worker had told him, and said that if the monster had a physical immunity rule, then maybe magic attacks would be its weakness. He attacked the monster with the Great Flame Explosion, but it failed because fire control could not be used normally in that abyss. He felt ashamed that fire was the only magic attack he had mastered. He was again attacked by the monster. He murmured to himself that the whereabouts of the boat had yet to be found. There was no way he would stay in the first room without moving forward. He remembered that Demon Spirit had physical immunity, but its attacks were mainly physical. He found that rule combination a bit strange. The monster of rule had a weapon in the shape of a shotel and kept on attacking Ye Qing with it, and he was attacking back with his dagger. When both of their weapons inclined, Ye Qing realized he could ward it off successfully, and he finally understood the rules and mechanisms. He recalled himself that the demon spirit would only materialize when an attack action was executed, and the scythe had not been withdrawn yet. Now the monster of rule had not only lost the protection of the rules that render physical attacks ineffective, but those physical attacks were its weakness instead. Gradually, the monster came into its second form with red flames coming out of it. Ye Qing figured out that after the scream had affected his hearing, his vision could not operate normally either. He wondered if he should deactivate the blood clone in advance to save his life. He realized he had just used that. The skill required a 30-second cooldown at least, and his remaining magic power could not withstand the loss of continuous summons. He had no time to react at all, and he could only avoid fatal blows by chance. He actually encountered an assassin who could not be defeated with his stacked attributes. The system offered him a card of regeneration that could activate a man-eating plant. His wounds were healed, but he was facing abnormal deafness. He needed to increase his health so he would not die from a single hit. He laminated himself because he knew that the demon spirit in its second form was afraid of luminous things. Even the faint light of healing magic made it scared to get closer to him. He understood the game and covered himself in fire ashes. While he was burning, he said that things were finally getting interesting and rushed towards the monster, but he was running away from him. The demon spirit was afraid of flames because flames were its life force, and it was just an innocent soul who had died in a fire. However, the skills of the fire element were cursed, becoming unusual. Ye Qing muttered that if he could not throw a fireball, then he would become a fireball himself and jumped on the monster that resulted in a great fire explosion. He was thrown back from the explosion and the demon spirit was defeated. Ye Qing's health was even lower than 1/10. The system informed him that his right arm was severely burned and he could not wield weapons or cast spells from that arm. He laughed, saying that the price of that victory was a little high. He wanted to wait until the regeneration ability's cooldown to end before healing. He screamed at the monster not to burn to ashes as he still needed it to recycle. He recycled the monster and got the artifact Soul Reaper card. The system told him that it could summon the demon spirit to rush forward and release a large-scale scythe harvest, causing 5 times the base damage. It further told him that if any target would die due to that skill, the Despair Harvest would be triggered immediately, restoring 5% of health and mana. If Despair Harvest was triggered more than 5 times at once, he would enter an incorporeal state for 1 second. In the incorporeal state, he would be immune to physical attacks and obstacles. He was also informed that if the attack does not cause death, the user would suffer backlash equal to the damage dealt. Artifacts could not be equipped, they were bound to the user's soul and could not be traded. Ye Qing held the card in his hand and stated that the cards he got that time were different. It was the first time he had seen a soul-bound artifact card. He noticed that the soul-harvesting blade seemed to be able to convert the killed target into health and mana. If it was summoned within a large group of soldiers, it could wipe out the whole group with 1 move. Then he realized that the cost of using the artifact was that if the attack does not kill the target, he would suffer the backlash of the damage outputted, or he could even die suddenly. He just needed to get the timing right. The door was unsealed and the regeneration cooldown ended. He called out his sister's name, Xiaozhou, and enthusiastically said that her brother was coming. There was a room where people were hung on chains upside down on the roof, and a giant weird-looking creature was chopping people out on the table. There was a drum with a hand sticking out of it. A girl named Ye Xiaozhou was standing behind with a glass bottle in her hand. She threw that bottle on the other side of the room. It broke and made a sound that turned the creature around, and he was looking in that direction. The girl slowly stepped out to catch her stuffed toy teddy that was lying in the distance from her, but she tripped on some bags and hit her head on the floor. While trying to catch her teddy, she murmured that she would not let her brother be bullied, but the creature stepped in front of her and roared on her face.
Don't forget to like and comment for the next part. Join our Discord for the name of the book and subscribe for more videos from us.